Oh, hi. Welcome to my favorite subject, math.
For the past month or so, we've been getting some pretty interesting teaser images posted on Twitter in regards to Baldi's Basics. And it's pretty exciting because this means the next installment is just around the corner. Baldi's world is about to get a whole lot bigger and a whole lot darker because we're going camping. And this camping scenario is going to be huge for Baldi for several different reasons. But as a quick recap before we dive into Theoryland, let's go over the two posts. The first post we saw featured a forest at nighttime, with what appeared to be a campfire in the distance. The image itself is super dark, but if we brighten it up a bit, it makes things easier to see. Now, this alone caught people off guard because it's hard to tell if this was an actual Baldi extension, or if it was just a screenshot of a different project. Nothing was mentioned in particular, but the bar in the bottom left corner did fit where the stamina bar was for Baldi's Basics. A few weeks later, things were a little bit more clear though, because the developer shared an image of Baldi in camping gear saying, "Let's go camping." Thus, the stage for Baldi's Basics 2 was set. But let's go back to that first image for a second here, because there are some things we can derive from this scene that may hint at what the gameplay is going to be like. Knowing we're on a camping trip with Baldi, which honestly sounds terrifying, one would assume that the campfire we see is probably our starting location or near our home base. Fires are usually made not far from where people reside when camping, so it makes me wonder if this will be an area we'll have to revisit often. Beyond that, it still looks like general Baldi mechanics are still in play. The trees that make up this forest are no different than the walls of the school. Because of their close proximity, they will act like walls and make this a maze. Now, the benefit to this is that you can see characters nearby in adjacent hallways, but I strongly believe this version of the game is going to be different than the previous one. As a child who is out camping in the woods, I imagine we're going to have a light source of some kind that is going to play a large role in the game. The white bar we see at the bottom could still be a stamina meter, but it makes me wonder if it is our flashlight's power supply as well. The environment is super dark here, so having some kind of light source is going to be crucial because having your computer on max brightness still yields an almost pitch black environment. But based on these things, we can also assume that not all the characters will be returning. The principal will more than likely not be in this installment, alongside arts and crafters and Gotta Sweep. They seem very school specific, and it wouldn't make sense for them to be brought on a camping trip. However, Playtime and It's a Bully could very well be in your class, so they may accompany you on this trip. Of course, Baldi appears to be the one hosting the trip, so he'll certainly be there. But there's a possibility your friend may be there too. He sent you back into the school to retrieve the notebooks in the first place, but since he's probably in your class, he may be in this second installment. First prize is a toss-up, honestly. But now that we have that covered, let's talk about this trip in general. There's a high chance that this trip we are on is a weekend math camp. It's also possible it's a week-long venture, and that this game takes place during the summer after Baldi's Basics 1 ended. Baldi is more than likely going to be the villain again. It wouldn't make sense for Baldi to take on a different role. And honestly, having Baldi roam around in the dark sounds twice as terrifying as the school, and having all this take place in a forest is a really cool throwback to one of Baldi's main inspirations. If we turn back the clock to 2012, indie horror games were popping up all over YouTube. Now obviously today isn't much different, but back then we didn't have the trends of today. This was years before Five Nights at Freddy's even came about, and the plethora of horror games that swept over the platform afterwards. Now, one popular creepypasta from years ago though, came out with a pretty noteworthy game. A game where you wander around a dark forest with a flashlight trying to retrieve 8 pages from a book. And just behind you was a terrifying entity known as Slender Man. Now, if you don't know who Slender Man is, you're probably new to the internet. He's absurdly tall, wears a dapper suit, lacks a face, and ultimately hunts you down. The stories involving this haunting figure range from several creepypastas online to actual incidents in real life. Some people took the stories too literally online and decided that stabbing people, burning houses, and all sorts of other things were okay in the name of Slender Man. which obviously they are not, and these were all horrible incidents. But the premise of some tall, faceless figure hunting down kids in the woods was definitely something that spread like wildfire on the internet. In that one game I mentioned earlier, Slender, the 8 pages, was definitely an inspiration for Baldi's Basics. That's what's exciting about this next installment of Baldi's. It's really diving into its Slenderman inspiration and taking us out into the dark woods, where Baldi will ultimately hunt us down. I'm not entirely sure we'll have to collect notebooks again, but if we do, it'd be very similar to Slender, the 8 pages. Overall, I'm excited to see how the new mechanics will be implemented given the new dark scenery. But more so, I'm also excited about the lore. Yes, the lore. Now, many of you would argue that Baldi's Basics has no lore, but with additional games coming out in the series, world building is taking place. We have the schoolhouse, a secret dimensional office, and now by the looks of it, a dark forest. But swinging back over to the secret ending in Baldi's Basics, it does make you wonder. In my previous video, we took a stab at explaining Baldi's secret ending. Since Baldi's is a metagame, this ending where we encounter File Name 2 could have very well been a ruse. A bunch of random dialogue poking fun at all the indie games of today that fall into the metagame category. Majority of horror-focused indie games have this element of storytelling in it, where they leave out crucial details that make you wonder, and File Name 2 touches on that perfectly. He even begins laughing based on the context of how absurd all of it sounds. But there's a major problem with that angle too. What we are told can be interpreted in 2 different ways, and even if it was meant to be absurd when we first encounter it, that doesn't mean it won't double back as something of actual importance when later installments come out. It's very similar to the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, where the story was developed by chunks, and things were capable of being interpreted differently between the individual games. If File 2's message isn't a parody of typical horror games, then it actually has a darker message. Anytime File Name 2 tries to spill the beans about important details, he is interrupted. He says he's corrupted, and his dialogue is always conveniently interrupted as if he's being censored from explaining what is truly going on. As he states, things are classified, and he's not allowed to say it. So perhaps the only way to talk is to speak oppositely of what he means. Most importantly out of all this though, is that the message takes us into the next game. We are told to turn off the game and destroy it, meaning our character we play as has to have this knowledge. However, we press on regardless. We will boot up Baldi's Basics 2 and descend further into this madness, regardless of the warnings we were given. I think this context is pretty interesting when we think about the mystery person we play as. We are willingly going to head into the dark woods after Baldi to retrieve whatever we are told to gather. And that highlights another interesting plot point with this whole ordeal. If this takes place after Baldi's Basics, then shouldn't Baldi rightfully want us dead? Why is Baldi happily inviting us to go out on a camping trip with him? It seems so backwards. Regardless of how you play through the main game, the only way to collect the notebooks is by answering your math problems wrong. Once you do that, Baldi's instantly trying to hunt you down and give you the spanking of a lifetime. And by that, I mean kill you. It's possible that Baldi is a hothead that turns back into a normal character once he's had time to sob about the problems you got wrong. But with that blood-curdling scream he let out at the end of the game, I have a hard time believing that he's simply going to forget about the math sins we committed. There's a possibility that the games will be separate universes too, so there's that. But if they are linked and the second game comes after the first, perhaps our friend will magically forget his belongings in the woods, or perhaps our mission this time won't be as silly. Either way, whatever that challenge is, there's probably going to be a way to make it insanely difficult, so that the best players will be rewarded with another obscure secret ending. Baldi's waiting for us in the dark, and it's up to us to wander through the dark woods looking for answers. But now that I shared that, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions for the next installment of Baldi's Basics? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked the video, be sure to subscribe for more. And with that, thanks for tuning in to this nighttime wander into the woods. Why don't you check out some of these videos? You won't be disappointed. Anyways, thanks for watching guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.